Join us as Waiter After Dark explores the storied history of a tiny island just off the coast of Maine. This small outcrop of rocks holds a history of tragedy, betrayal, treason, the paranormal, cannibalism, a love story, as well as the brave and fearless lineage of lighthouse keepers and the salty nerves of steel. Put on your life preservers and join us as we go back through time to tell the disturbing story of Boon Island. I am Chris.
I'm Kathy.
And I'm Sean.
And this is Waiter After Dark. If you were stranded on a deserted island and you could only bring one thing, what would you bring?
Oh, I know. I would bring something to start a fire.
Oh, good answer, yeah.
I'm not going to sit there and whittle two sticks together. So I would need a way to make fire.
Okay. I feel like no matter what I bring, I'm fucked as a vegan. So I'm just going to accept death and bring nothing. Yeah, hope. A lot of hope that someone's going to come find me.
Well, you could eat a squirrel or a chipmunk if you had to.
On an island? I don't think they have squirrels on island. How big's the island?
Ooh, it's a small island.
Yeah. I'm going to have
a bird. Eat a bird.
I don't think I could stomach down a bird.
You know what I would bring?
What's that?
Slashback Cinema.
Oh, gosh.
Terrible transition, I know.
I love the plug, though, because we just actually met two awesome humans, Shawnee and Ryan, over at Slashback Cinema. And gang, if you like weird New England history like we know you do, you probably also like horror, just like Kathy, Chris, and I. And if you do, our friends Shawnee and Ryan over at Slashback Cinema, what they do is host a podcast focused on those old horror movies from the 70s and 80s, bringing back that iconic, nostalgic, scary vibes. And Chris, Kathy, and I were just kind of sitting here going through their backlog and just kind of looking at some of those old movies. And did any stand out to y'all as we were looking through this?
The one that popped out at me, because it literally terrified me as a child, was the episode that they did on Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, it's so good.
Freddy Krueger is scary as fuck. Comes and he kills you in your sleep. No escaping him. And then the part in the movie, the girl's running up the stairs, their feet are sinking in and they're getting stuck, and then it kills them in the waterbed. It's so bad. It's so bad, but terrifies me.
You've got some traumatic memories here.
I do, yeah. I
need to talk it out.
I know.
You need to process it.
That's good. We can just forget it.
I'm actually glad we're talking about this because I'm going to put Freddy Krueger Fear for Kathy in my back pocket.
Oh my God,
that is coming back. Chris, what about you? Anything on this list?
Oh, you know what? I saw the movie Gremlins in the movie theater when I was 6 or 7 years old.
Epic.
Yeah. I had to be taken out. I was crying. It was scary as fuck. You don't bring a 6-year-old to watch Gremlins in the movie theater.
Shawnee and Ryan, you should have brought Chris on for your episode. You would have some real tears in that episode. I love it. And I was looking through and I saw Tremors. Y'all remember that movie?
Oh, yeah. Tremors.
I'll tell you, I was never a fisher, and it might have been because of those fucking giant worms. I just don't think that was for me.
That was Kevin Bacon, right?
Yeah, you got it. Gang, if you enjoy those horror movies, make sure you go over to Slashback Cinema. Give Shawnee and Ryan a listen. Definitely having a lot of fun over there. You won't regret it. And in fact, we've got a little surprise collab potentially coming up with them, right?
Yes. I am going to be starting my research on the Amityville horror, and I'm going to be covering that story a couple weeks, I think, maybe in about a month or so.
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
So
I'm
you're going
excited.
to do the real story,
Yes.
and then they're going to review the movie and talk about the movie, and then maybe we can share episodes.
Exactly.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, it's going to be super cool, right? So we're going to deep dive the story. You come here, listen to us, get the backgrounds, and Shawnee and Ryan will be with us. And then over on their podcast, we'll all watch the movie together and kind of dive into that. It's going to be super cool.
I'm excited.
Yes.
It'll be
Sounds like
fun.
a lot of fun.
Yeah, so gang, be on the lookout for that over the next couple months. And with that, Chris, you ready to dive into today's story?
All right, let's go.
Let's do it.
So first, I want to introduce you to one of our main characters in the story, Boon Island. This island is a tiny speck of an island just off the shore of Maine, 700 by 300 feet at low tide and 150 by 50 feet at high tide.
So this is a small
Okay,
fucking
yeah.
island.
It is tiny.
How big is it?
At high tide,
Yeah.
it's 150 by 50 feet.
So it's a fucking rock.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
basically
not
an
an
outcrop of
island.
rocks. Yep. It's surrounded by the relentless and awe-inspiring Atlantic Ocean. During storm surges, it is not uncommon for the highest points only to be exposed, roughly 40 square feet. This tiny island is also completely barren. Barely above sea level, no vegetation grows on this island. It is a haven for seals and seagulls, and today a solar-powered automated lighthouse stands 188 feet high from the rocks and continues to light the way for mariners.
I just want to go back to if I could bring anything, what I bring, and I just want to double down now based on the description. I am fucked. I am so fucked. No vegetation. I'm going to be fucking seal food.
Yeah, I was gonna say, or you could eat a seal.
I'm not eating a seal.
I mean, if you're going to die.
What about a seagull?
I don't know. They don't seem like they'd taste good either.
You don't have any fire. You'd have to eat it raw.
Oh.
That's why I brought fire.
All right. A wind and weather-beaten small rock-built house, still partially standing, is a reminder and testament to the lighthouse keepers that came before and their rugged but simple life that they led. Seeing pictures of this tiny rock outcrop surrounded by the mighty Atlantic, the ruins of this small one-room house, makes you think about the isolation and sense of duty of this brave and bold lineage of lighthouse keepers. The island, if you can even call it that, is roughly 6 miles from the shore, and on a clear day you can see it from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and from York, Maine. But for all intents and purposes, it is isolated and foreign a landscape as the moon. For context, I just want you to Google a picture of this island. The picture will give you a much better sense of the perils of the story that we will try to bring to life today.
Googling it right now. Okay, I can see the lighthouse and the building on it. Okay.
Oh, it's so little.
Yeah, it'd be crazy, right?
How close is this to Smutty Nose? They were about 6 miles off the coast of Portsmouth as well, so they gotta be pretty close, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, let me
It's got to be the same kind of island chain.
Oh, no, they're not. Boon Island, all by itself. It looks like it might be a couple miles north of the Isle of Shoals where Smutty Nose is.
It's like this picture that I'm looking at, like it's just rock.
Could you imagine being stranded on that island for 10 days
No.
in the late fall?
No.
Could you imagine being the lighthouse keeper?
No.
Completely isolated for entire weeks at a time?
God, no.
All the way through the winter?
No. What happens like when a storm comes? The house must get just flooded.
Oh, you're going to find out.
I'm excited.
So what if I were to tell you that this tiny island was connected to a story of betrayal, treason, the paranormal, pirates, cannibalism, and love?
Cannibalism?
Cannibalism?
All on this tiny outcrop of rocks.
I'd say some shit went down.
I say, yeah, I'm going to say some lighthouse guy went a little crazy.
Yeah, for such a small and insignificant island, it has a long and disturbing, mysterious history that I want to share with you guys. So to start, on September 10th, in 1710, the Nottingham Gala set sail from England en route to Ireland and then on to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, with cargo of finely made mariner rope. Its captain, John Dean, his brother Gaspar, and the ship's owner, Miles Whitworth, as well as the crew of 12, all set sail under fair skies. The ship was also joined by 2 Royal Navy warships due to the threat of French pirates sailing about the Irish coast. At that time, the French were at war with the British in the American colonies, or the Queen Anne War as it will become known. The French monarchy handed out privateer papers to French captains, giving them permission, at least in French law, to take British merchant ships and keep the cargo to themselves. So the 2 well-armed royal warships to escort the Nottingham was a welcome sight. Captain Dean, now underway, heading for Ireland, mysteriously broke off from the 2 warships, escorting them to go to the Irish port of Killybeag. He reported the change in course was to buy cheese and butter that he would later sell in Portsmouth. This was a strange and risky move in the minds of the crew, as Killybeag was a known port for French privateers, and leaving the royal warship escort was inviting trouble.
I smell something suspicious going on here, Chris.
Gets a little bit strange.
Either that or that man just wants some cheese.
This man loves his cheese.
He's like, I'll do some weird shit for cheese.
He does turn out to be a bit of a rat.
Ooh.
Oh.
Not bad. Dad joke number 1. Even stranger to the crew, Captain Dean, after spending several hours ashore, reported back he did not like the prices of the dairy product and decided not to buy them. Dean continued to stall and remain in the waters off the dangerous Irish coast for several more days. Every minute that passed put the Nottingham and its crew at risk of French privateers. At this point, rumors flew around the crew of the captain's incompetence or death wish. Rumors of mutiny, a hangable offense in the early 1700s, were starting to be whispered amongst the crew's ranks.
Come on, guys. He just wants some cheese. Like, come on.
Let the man have it.
So sitting off these perilous shores, the Nottingham crew sighted the sails of a French privateer ship. Their fears were realized. They were going to be victims of the French pirates, who were famous for taking no prisoners. Dean, to the surprise of the crew, instead of making a run for it, turned and sailed towards the French pirate ship.
Okay, this is so sus.
Yeah, a little bit suspect, right? So 2 different stories have been told about Captain Dean's actions that day. First, in later writings, Dean would claim he planned to invade the pirate ship and take out the feared privateers for his beloved crown of England.
Noble.
However, his crew also, in later writings, would report they believed Dean had a deal with the French pirates and was hoping to cash in on the hefty insurance policy the ship had taken out. They also point to the strange coincidence that the ship's owner, Miles Whitworth, happened to be on board for this trip. Having the boat owner on board was something none of the crew had ever seen before. They also theorized that the captain might have been smuggling goods to the French as a traitor to the crown. However, the slow merchant ship loaded down with cargo could not catch up to the French privateer ship, and regardless of the captain's intentions, the Nottingham continued on course to Portsmouth, New Hampshire to sell and pick up cargo.
It couldn't catch the pirate ship?
They couldn't catch up to it. It was too fast.
What?
Yeah.
Yay! Why are we selling this as a bad thing?
So the crew's rumors of mutiny were eventually heard by the captain and met with extreme prejudice. He reportedly beat 2 men so badly they could not work or even walk for weeks.
Damn.
He also gave the entire crew half rations of food. Now, physical punishment for sailors that were not carrying their weight or questioning the captain was common. What was uncommon was the brutality of the discipline handed out by Captain Dean. Mutiny or not, it was clear the crew was not fond of this captain, and tensions ran high already on the first leg of this trip.
Yeah, this is super manipulative. It's just like, he's putting them at danger. They're like, this isn't part of the mission, bro. And then he's like, half rations, motherfuckers. Like, what?
So I think it's important to point out, for the crew to publicly go against the captain of the ship in the 1700s was unheard of. And when 3 crew members wrote the story of that day, this unwritten code violation of going against the captain's word gave their version of the story more credence in many people's eyes. More typically, just like Vegas, what happens on the ship stays on the ship. So this was a big change in the way that they handled it. The Nottingham, after several torturous weeks at sea under this brutal captain with half rations of food and vicious beatings, finally reached the shores of Canada. Canada was currently held by the French, and privateer boats looking to loot English merchant ships patrolled the coast. English merchant ships took their lives in their own hands when sailing through these waters. Again, Captain Dean sat off the shore of their enemies for weeks without explanation to the crew, almost inviting danger. Tensions and fear continued to grow, and rumors, despite the severe beatings, continued to fly. When the crew saw a strange ship speeding towards them, Dean, instead of fleeing, opened the captain's bar to the crew, and Dean, his brother, and Miles put on their best clothes and came to the deck to await the mysterious ship. This confirmed for the crew that Dean was a traitor and had to deal with the French privateers, a claim that Dean would later refute. Either way, the ship turned out to be an English schooner and not a pirate. Dean continued to stall off the shores of Canada, even when a nasty nor'easter started to dump rain and hail on them. Dean had an argument with his first mate, Christopher, about the storm, and his first mate implored him to sail on to the safety of Portsmouth Harbor. Dean beat his first mate to a bloody pulp, forcing him to his chambers, unable to work or even stand. With the storm worsening, the waves and wind threatening to break the Nottingham apart, Dean was forced to continue on his way to Portsmouth. Trying to navigate with poor visibility, the pounding rain and hail, not being able to see more than a few feet in front of them, the Nottingham came to a sudden and violent stop, wrecking on the rocky shores of Boon Island off the coast of Maine, only 6 miles from its destination of Portsmouth Harbor. In the heavy storm, and with the boat being beaten against the rocky shore, the men had to abandon boat. Using the mast of the ship, the crew was able to crawl to the safety of the island. As the splinters of the Nottingham continued to be battered against the rocks, 15 men were able to escape the wreck. Only 9 would live to tell the tale. So remember, this island has about 150 square feet during high tide. And during the nor'easter, the storm surge, even less of the land was above water. At times during bad storms, waves would crash over the highest points of the island, and the stranded men were at constant risk of being swept away by a rogue wave. Also, this island has no vegetation, no shelter, and during the storm, just 6 miles away from the safety of Portsmouth, nobody could see them.
That's so spooky. I also feel like this Dean guy just fucked everybody so many times.
He was just a real dick.
He continues to be a dick.
Oh, I want to know so bad. Are we going to find out? Like, was this all a setup? Was he like, did he have something going on with the French privateers? It sounds like it.
I mean,
it's the only thing that explains everything.
We don't know for sure, but there's more evidence that he's kind of a dick. So
Okay.
we'll get into that.
All right.
So, alone on this island, being late November, the men barely made it through the first night, not having cold weather gear, no food, and no way of making fire. All they could do is sit and wait out the storm. The next morning, the storm's still raging. They were able to make a tent from part of the sail that washed ashore. They were also able to eat some cheese and marrow from some beef bones that washed ashore from the wreck. The first mate, Christopher, he was able to kill a seagull with a rock, and the men ate the bird raw.
Oh,
Due to not being able to make fire. Yeah, could you imagine eating raw bird meat? You have to remember, they were already starving because of the half rations, so they were pretty desperate at this point.
Honestly, I respect the ability to hit a bird with a rock, because I'm sure that's
pretty
yeah,
badass.
I mean, that's impressive.
Especially in a storm, it sounds like all that.
If there's a hero in this story, it is the first mate, Christopher.
Are you just saying that?
Yeah, because it's your name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That too. So on the third night, the ship's cook died of hypothermia. This is when whispers of cannibalism started to circulate.
Ew, that means they ate them raw?
So the next day, 2 ships heading for Portsmouth Harbor sailed past the island, but in the bad weather, the men were not able to get their attention. As the storm started to lift, land was a mere 6 miles away. The crew tried to build a crude boat out of the wreckage of the Nottingham that washed ashore, and 2 of the crew members volunteered to brave the 6-mile stretch to Portsmouth Harbor to get help. The boat set out from the land side, trying to time the waves so not to be dashed against the rocky shore. They were able to safely launch, but only 30 feet from the island, the makeshift boat turned over. And the 2 crew members were lost to the raging Atlantic, never to be seen again.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, this must have killed the morale of the men.
Yeah.
Like, here's our last hope. Nope, they're gone. Several days later, a Swedish sailor made a raft with a small sail cut out of the makeshift tent, and him and another crew member tried the trip again. The boat seemed to be doing okay as it sailed out of sight. Swedish sailor was never seen again. His faithful crew of 1, his frozen body was washed up on the shore of Boon Island
shit.
several hours later for the stranded men to find.
Oh.
The stranded men recovered his body to turn to cannibalism to stave off starvation, but they found the body frozen solid and with no way of thawing it out in the freezing temperatures. They were unable to butcher the remains.
Oh, but they tried.
They tried.
Oh, that's so graphic in my brain.
Ooh, it gets worse.
I don't like it. I don't know if I like this story.
It gets worse before it gets better.
But it gets better. No, it doesn't. It doesn't get better.
No.
The weather started to get worse again when it began to snow. The men with frostbite and soaked clothing freezing to the bodies at the point of starvation turned to eating snow for water. This further lowering their already dangerously low core temperatures. The ship's carpenter seemed to be in the worst shape of the crew members. That night, he stopped talking altogether. Then, the unthinkable happened. The accounts of this night differ again. The captain wrote this was against his orders, and he tried to stop the crew from this unholy act, but it was too late. They had already killed the carpenter. However, the crew reported Captain Dean, who was a butcher in England when he was younger, killed the carpenter. He then cut his breast meat into small strips, soaked it in salt water, then wrapped the meat in seaweed and handed out pieces to the entire crew to eat.
Ew.
Oh, my God. That
so
is
bad.
so disturbing.
So graphic.
Ew.
2 of the 3 crew members who wrote of these events reported they refused to eat their former crew member. The 3rd reported he regrettably gave in to his hunger, saying 10 days stranded on this island made good men do unthinkable things. The truth of how this is unfolded is forever lost to time.
Okay, I gotta know. You're stranded on an island. You're hungry. Are you doing it?
No, not raw.
Oh. But
I mean-
cooked your end?
I mean,
I'd eat some cooked Sean meat if I, like, what's the matter with you?
I want to say no.
You want to say no, but like I feel like we're lying to ourselves.
Yeah,
right.
I mean-
like I feel like if you're there and it's like life or death, and it was the only option for my own survival at that point, like even as a token vegan of the crew here, I feel like you got to do what you got to do to survive.
I mean, I could definitely like see myself being like, okay, I'm gonna have to kill like a chipmunk,
10 days on the island, you had half rations of food for the entire trip. You were already starving. You've already lost weight. I wouldn't do it, but I could see why people would be considering it.
Am I the only one here saying they're dead? I'm like, yeah, I'd probably do it.
No, because
Chris is
I'm
Kathy's
thinking-
contemplating.
Yeah, well, no, because I mean, I'm thinking like there was that plane crash. They made the movie. I think it was like Alive. I'm sure those people like never went into that situation thinking that they would do that.
Yeah, they were soccer players. Yeah, they weren't. And they're like, let's fucking eat some people.
Yeah, and then like, what was it? The person that got stuck in between the rock.
Oh, the guy who cut off his
yeah,
own arm?
Yeah, so when you're in desperate, dire situations, you do things that you normally wouldn't be able to do. So I'd like to say I would not do it, but I can't say I wouldn't do it.
She had to sell herself on that.
Yeah, she's like talking herself out of it.
30 seconds of talking about why, people might, just to like feel like I'm okay to say.
Yeah,
Let's be honest. If Whole Foods wouldn't deliver and I'd have to go to the grocery store, I would start considering it.
Yeah.
hey. I'm afraid to go to sleep now.
So the next morning, a fisherman by the name of John Stover spotted the stranded men from his schooner. He took his canoe and rowed it over to the tiny island at great personal risk of capsizing in the stormy seas. He reports he first talked to Captain Dean, a man with a long, unkept beard, windburned, seemingly skin and bones with sores and frostbite across his hands and face. Dean led him to a tent where he saw 8 men in even worse shape than the captain, all huddled together for warmth in various stages between life and death. He reported they crawled at him, grabbing at his ankles with frostbitten hands, begging him for transport to safety. Stover, who took a canoe to the island from his schooner anchored safely away off the rocky shore, promised he would return with help to rescue the men as soon as the storm broke. He started a fire on the island to help the men keep warm and headed to shore to get help.
He couldn't just put some people in the canoe.
I guess it was going to capsize if he tried to take people back.
How would you feel in that moment? Like, someone's here, you're like, finally fucking safety, and then he's just like, here's a fire, get warm, I'll be back. Do you trust that?
He said, I'll be back, but you know what?
I don't think he comes back.
So the next day, John and several others, braving the weather and still poor conditions, returned to rescue the men. Some of the men were so weak, they had to be carried onto the boat.
Damn.
So he did come back.
He did come back with help.
What a good guy.
The men, now safely in Portsmouth, were taken to a local tavern and slowly fed so they could adjust to eating food again. Doctors were brought in to start removing toes and fingers that were lost to frostbite. The worst case of frostbite ended with a crew member losing most of his foot.
Oh.
New Hampshire's Lieutenant Governor, John Wentworth, paid for the rooms, food, doctor care out of his own pocket.
Oh, good guy.
Good dude. Captain Dean, once he recovered, stayed at a friend's house in Portsmouth and promptly wrote a paper about his ordeals on Boon Island. As you might have already guessed, he was the hero in the story.
Shocker.
He wrote he refused food and gave it to the crew, and he tried to stop the cannibalism, and he refused to take part in it. He also reported that he sang to the men at night to keep up their morale. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So Christopher, the first mate, and the 2 other crew members, upon returning to England, wrote their own accounts of these desperate days on Boon Island and distributed them to coffee houses across London. They painted Dean as a brutal, heartless coward and a traitor to the crown. Their accounts reported Dean was the one who killed the ship's carpenter and led the cannibalism. Now remember, going against the captain's word was highly irregular in these times. Now Dean, getting his word out first, he was believed, and he was able to secure a job as a Russian naval captain. He reported in later writings that he would capture 20 enemy ships in service to the Russian Navy. However, after capturing a Swedish ship, an English warship was spotted closing in. Again, just like he did off the Irish coast and the Canadian coast, he did not run. Rather, he waited for the ship to close in. The Russian naval ship was taken by the British. Suspiciously, Dean was not just spared. He was offered a job as a British spy for the crown.
Yeah.
Okay.
This guy's shady as fuck.
Yeah. Again, his first mate accused him of taking a bribe and delivering the Russian ship to the English. He was found guilty in an English court, but he was demoted to a less prestigious position than spy for the crown. Dean later married a wealthy English woman and accepted a new role as a diplomat. He died comfortably as compound in the English countryside at the age of 81.
This seems unfair.
Yeah.
This guy's over here killing Carpenter, but like cutting up his breasts and being like, chicken fingers, everyone. And like, he gets this like nice ending. Come on.
Yeah, no, it was a kind of a tragic tale of how this guy got away with really being a dick. But this is not the last tragic story of Boon Island. So I want you guys to fast forward to the 1840s. Boon Island had a lighthouse added to the island by the state of Maine to keep ships like the Nottingham from wrecking on its shores. A small one-room rock-built house that would stand up to the brutal wind was also added for the lighthouse keeper to live in, and supplies were planned to be sent out weekly, weather permitting. The new lighthouse keeper, Luke Bright, and his new wife, Catherine, moved to the island. Luke, having landed a respectable job of lighthouse keeper, was then confident enough to ask his longtime girlfriend to marry him. They married and quickly took their new post at Luke's new job overlooking Boon Island. They both knew this would be a difficult, solitude lifestyle, but it was a respectable job with good pay, free housing, and food and supplies were provided. Remember, they were the only two on this tiny island for an entire week, and their only break from this remote, barren landscape was a weekly delivery of supplies. At the same time, they were newlyweds. Isolated, yes, but set against the rugged backdrop of the untamed Atlantic Ocean, surrounded by seals basking on the rock in the sun, and they were the first two to see the sunrise off the New England rocky coastline. So there was a romantic, natural beauty and feeling of a honeymoon escape for the young couple.
Yeah, for the first couple days, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, hon, I love you, but how long were they there for? 10?
Not too long.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Ends
Well,
bad.
And do you know what's not great for relationships? A lot of like environmental stress.
Yeah.
It's like this place got a shit ton of that.
yeah.
I don't know. I think I'd enjoy it for 10 minutes. Then I get scared.
Yeah.
So with tasks around the lighthouse being important but simple, this young couple started their lives together. So only a few weeks into their stay on the island, November brought up a mighty nor'easter. The wind harrowed nonstop. The waves crashed against the now seemingly smaller and more isolated island. Rain and snow mixed in the kind of blinding hailstorm that only the coast of Maine could possibly produce. The waves crashed and periodically covered most of the land. Against Catherine's pleas, that evening, Luke left the safety of the house. Only 30 feet away was the door to the lighthouse. He had to light the fire at the top of the 188-foot tower. Catherine begged him to stay, but Luke, knowing he had an unbreakable promise to the safety of the maritime community, he needed to light the way for the ships to safely return home in the storms. He tied a rope tightly around his waist, and the other end to a post in the home installed for that exact situation, just in case a wave swept over the island again. He pushed through the wind and rain, struggling to make any progress on this 30-foot walk to the lighthouse door, as he did with ease on every other night. A walk that was so easy just one day before was now torturous and filled with peril. Hard to see the blinding wind and hail. With great effort and determination, fighting Mother Nature herself, he looked up briefly and found himself only feet away from the lighthouse door. Just then, a wave crashed over the island, knocking him off of his feet, and helpless against the raw power of the relentless Atlantic Ocean, he was pulled out to sea. Tethered by the now seemingly string that once had the full reassurance of a 2-inch thick mariner rope, his wife watched horrified from the window. Filled with terror and adrenaline, she ran out of the house in just a white nightgown and grabbed the rope that was tied around her husband's waist. Somehow, against all odds, working against the power of the immovable Atlantic Ocean, she was able to pull him back to shore and across the rocks into the safety of the doorway of the lighthouse.
What?
Yeah.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
What happens?
Ooh.
Yeah.
What happens, Chris?
Come on, keep going. Is he alive?
So, frozen half to death, badly injured, after being beaten against the rocky shore with the relentless waves, he laid there at the foot of the stairs to the lighthouse, his wife holding on to his frozen body as he succumbed to his injuries.
Oh.
Catherine, call it shock or grief or helplessness, lied there with her husband's lifeless body, holding him for 4 long days, waiting for the supply boat to make its weekly appearance. In fact, the only time she left her husband in these 4 long days and nights was to go up the 164 stairs every evening to light the fire for the lighthouse that allowed the light to warn others of the deadly rocky shores of this tiny island. So close to land, still millions of miles from anyone who could help. When on the 4th night, seeing the lighthouse not be lit, the men from the supply boat arrived early on the tiny island the next day. They were surprised not to find the couple waiting for them to help unload the supplies, as they had in the past weeks. Both men almost instinctually knew something was terribly wrong. They started to search the tiny island. It didn't take long for them to find Luke's frozen body and Catherine lying next to him, holding his lifeless body against hers at the foot of the stairs of the lighthouse.
So sad.
One of the men later guessed it was probably about 10 degrees in the landing of the lighthouse. It must have dropped well below freezing overnight. There was no way a person could survive these conditions, only wearing a nightgown. The men's horrific realization was the correct one. Catherine, too, had succumbed to the bitter cold, and the young newlyweds lay there in each other's arms in a final peaceful rest.
It's so sad.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry,
I'm not
to make
laughing.
you cry.
I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's just really sad.
Yeah. Also kind of beautiful though,
Yeah,
that she like
like-
wouldn't leave his side and like stayed there. It's like kind of
Oh.
So Catherine passed away, but was not gone. This was not the last Catherine was seen on the island. Thomas, the most recent and the last of a proud lineage of lighthouse keepers, tells the stories of his time of solitude, but not being alone on Boon Island.
We got ghosts, Chris.
We got ghosts
We
next.
got ghosts now.
Oh, yeah, dry my eyes. Hold on. I'm a little teary-eyed.
So Thomas, the last of the lighthouse keepers, reported he knew of the death of the first lighthouse keepers on the island, but he saw it as a warning from his predecessors as to the power and unpredictability of the Atlantic Ocean and to respect the wrath of Mother Nature. However, he was not familiar with the tragic details of the grief-stricken Catherine and Luke's last moments on the island. Thomas did report on several occasions, alone and isolated on this rocky outcrop called Boon Island. Late at night, he would hear a knock on the door. Positive that the isolation was playing tricks on his mind, he stepped outside and to his shock watched an apparition of a girl dressed in an all-white nightgown floating to the lighthouse door and disappearing.
Creepy.
Just as strange, he reports often feeling uncomfortable at the foot of the stairs before climbing the 164 stairs to the top of the lighthouse. He reported a chilling, almost haunting presence, and he would often rush through this area when having to make the climb to the top of the lighthouse. Echoing in his mind the warnings of isolation on the human condition, he was able to convince himself that this was not real. Once he heard the details of the story of Luke and Catherine, all of a sudden his paranormal experiences made perfect sense, and any idea that his mind was playing tricks on him or the effects of isolation on the human psyche were all put to rest. He was seeing the ghost of Catherine and feeling the emotional trauma of her last days at the foot of the lighthouse stairs. The skeptic now knew his experience was as real as the wind on your face as it swept across the island's barren landscape. Other previous lighthouse keepers also tell strange paranormal tales. There are reports that dogs staying on the island refused to go into the lighthouse. Foghorns going off on the island when the keeper knew they were alone on the island. One keeper reports he could not get back to the island before dark one night. When he showed up on the island, he found someone or something had lit that lighthouse for him.
What?
Yeah. There are also numerous reports by past keepers of not feeling alone as they climbed 164 stairs to perform their nightly duties. Now in 1980, after a particularly strong storm that damaged the lighthouse and almost took the life of Thomas, the last keeper, the lighthouse was repaired and automated and is now solar powered. Other than the occasional maintenance worker on the island was returned to the seals and seagulls and to the apparition of Catherine as she takes up her husband's position, looking over the island. She was the wife of the first keeper of the lighthouse, and now she remains as the final and eternal keeper of Boon Island. So for such a small and inconspicuous island, so much tragedy, palpably disturbing stories, the island must have a powerful emotional energy. And against the backdrop of the ever-changing weather and relentless Atlantic Ocean, could you imagine spending weeks at a time alone with your imagination in this landscape?
Wow, what an island. What a story.
Yeah, especially after seeing the pictures, I could not imagine spending an entire week alone there.
Even with the house. Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, no.
I wouldn't leave the house.
Yeah. Kathy, your face.
Yeah, I'm just like lost for words. That story was just like really sad. And then the captain before, and for such a small little space of land.
It's literally 150 by 50 square feet.
So much tragedy there.
I don't know, obviously, what the afterlife is, but what a afterlife of solitude and loneliness to be a spirit and an experience and never interacting with anything if it's still there. Like, oof.
Yeah, and to be trapped there for all eternity, kind of a heavy thought.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it. If you paid me $100,000, I don't think I could spend a week alone on that island after looking at the pictures.
No. For $100,000.
Yeah, give me a couple good books.
Yeah, I mean,
I could spend a couple months.
Yeah. We got technology now.
You said food's coming, that lighthouse is automated. I'm in.
Yeah.
Not during the winter, though.
No, not during the winter.
Oh, yeah.
No.
They were out there year round. Could you imagine these lighthouse keepers? I mean, some of them lived there alone without their family, and weeks at a time went by on that tiny island.
I think I could do the solitude, is like, so as long as I had books or something to keep me busy, like doing some fucking yoga and meditation on that. Like, come on, Chris, you can meditate for a fucking week out there by yourself.
Okay, yeah, I could sit and meditate.
Only for so long, then you need human connection and interaction. Like,
you're like, weather's starting to turn. Is my supply boat coming this week?
Yeah.
I would play games with my head, trying to sleep, knowing that there's a storm coming. I don't know.
That sounds terrifying.
I got to be honest. That was the first time I read the end of Catherine's story without tearing up. Every time I edited, it's like, shit, I'm crying again.
It is sad.
It was so sad.
It's so heart-wrenching. Well, Chris, what a crazy story. Who would have thought a 150 by 100-foot island, whatever it would have this much action back? Thank you for sharing this story of Boon Island. You're right. Chris came in and was like, I think this is one of my favorite stories so far. And I can totally see why, dude. It was phenomenal. Many thanks. And gang, I hope you love the story as well. And a reminder that we will be dropping some images here of Chris's research and his story on our Instagram. Again, you can find that at Weirder After Dark. Don't forget, we're not just on Instagram. We are building some communities out there. So not only can you find us there on Instagram, but you can find us on Facebook as well as on Reddit by searching at Weirder After Dark. And there you can connect with us as well as other listeners that are loving this shit just like you. And we are always on the lookout here for your weird stories, creepy stories, strange stories. What's going on? Have you been abducted? Is there a ghost in your kitchen? You having some weird dreams? We don't know what it is, but if you are having something like that, write your story and send it to us. And you can send that to thegang@weirderafterdark.com. And remember, if you are liking this shit, if you are loving this shit, the best thing that you can do for us is to go ahead and share an episode of this pod with someone that you know and someone you love. It'd mean the absolute world. And as always, remember, it always gets a little weirder after dark.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.